Welcome back. Following the landmark ruling in abortion in Northern Ireland this week, we ask, will it force change in the Republic? On the panel this evening, Aodhan O Riordain, Minister of State for Equality, New Communities, Culture and National Drugs Strategy, Cora Sherlock, Vice Chair of the Pro-Life Campaign, Renua Senator Paul Bradford and Arlette Lyons, representative for Termination for Medical Reasons campaign. Mary-Louise O'Donnell will join us later for our preview of the papers. If you'd like to comment on the programme, you can text us at 53131, but place the word tonight before your comment. Send us a tweet at #VinB or email us at tonight@tv3.ie. Just to remind you that Vincent will be in the Limerick STRAND Hotel for the Limerick City Constituency People's Debate on Monday next. We ask people to come along at 7 p.m. No ticket is required. We're just going to go to a clip in a minute, but just first of all to remind people who may not be totally up with it about Monday's ruling in Northern Ireland, in which Mr. Justice Horner said that women who are the victims of sexual crime and whose baby has a fatal fetal abnormality are entitled to exemptions in the law on abortion. He found that abortion legislation in Northern Ireland breached Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights by failing to provide exceptions to the prohibition on abortion in those particular cases. Now, let's just take a look at what Paul Bradford had to say in the Shannon yesterday.
Language, Cathaoirleach, is something I just want to mention, because language is not just powerful, it is a very strong weapon. And when we speak this easy phrase, fatal fetal abnormalities, we are talking about babies who have a life-limiting or a very life-threatening condition. They are human beings, and at least one grouping representing parents who had such babies who might have lived for a day, a week, or a month, attempted to make their views known to the Oireachtas Health Committee here 2 short years ago, and were not allowed to do so. So I think we need to be sensitive. There are no such babies as babies with fatal fetal abnormalities. There are babies with very serious, very profound, life-threatening and life-limiting conditions, but they are still human beings.
Paul, just to go to you, that sentence, there are no such babies as babies with fatal fetal abnormalities.
Well, from a medical perspective, there is no such term as fatal fetal abnormalities. It's a term, I suppose, which has entered the currency over the past 3 or 4 years. There are, of course, babies with life-threatening, life-limiting illnesses, and that's the point I was making. And it's something which has been raised with me quite regularly. Again, I suppose over the past 2 or 3 year period by 2 groups in particular. One group, Every Life Counts, another group, One Day More. They claim that they find this phrase particularly insensitive. They also, raise the issue of the phrase incompatible with life. They make the point to me, and I find it impossible to disagree, that once there is a prospect of life, be it for an hour or a day or a week, we can't, we can't say with certainty.
But when prospective parents are told by a doctor or by a medical team that there is virtually no chance of a baby surviving life, that's fatal fetal abnormality.
Well, when parents hear such awful news, the first thing is that we must remind ourselves how dreadful that must be. The argument I was trying to present, and maybe I didn't do so perfectly, none of us are perfect, is that we need to be careful about the use of language. Now, people have claimed that they're upset with what I have said. I just want to put on record that groups who unfortunately weren't allowed to come before the Oireachtas hearings have said to us that the term fatal fetal abnormality is one which deeply upsets them, because in some instances their babies might have been born as they lived for an hour, a day, a week, and they wanted that view presented. They have sought actually meetings occasionally, I think, with both the previous health minister and the current health minister. They didn't do so. And could I also just remind you, Michael, in a Dáil debate some months ago, and as I say, I'm in the Senate rather than in the Dáil, but Minister Radker, I think, used the phrase that fatal fetal abnormalities were babies who were dead in the womb. Now, in fairness, he corrected the record of the Dáil. It's rarely would a minister correct the record of the Dáil.
He corrected. Yeah. OK, Arlette, I mean, tragically, you had to travel to Liverpool in 2011. I think you've spoken about it, to terminate a much-wanted pregnancy when you found out that your baby had no chance of survival.
Yeah.
What do you think of that in terms of the term, for instance, in the first instance?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to come on a personal view and also as a representative of Terminations for Medical Reasons. I suppose Paul's comments, you know, yesterday, the day before, it deeply hurt a lot of us, you know, saying that there was no such thing as a fatal fetal abnormality. It also, you know, it hurt people that didn't have a termination, that brought their babies to the end of the pregnancy. It also hurt them because it very much was a fatal fetal abnormality. I think one thing that I really can't abide is the lies that are spread when it comes to fatal fetal abnormality or a severe illness.
What kind of lies?
Okay, well, a fatal fetal abnormality is where you're giving a 0% chance that your baby's going to survive. Now, we need to trust our doctors that is the case. We get tests through the placenta. They're not guesswork. It is 100% accurate. And a baby with a disability, a special needs, or, you know, a short life-limiting condition is completely different.
And Arlette, just to clarify, that people in your organisation and people obviously you would have come into contact with because of your own tragic situation.
Yeah.
In all those instances, or some or most of them, is it a question that they're told the baby has no chance of survival or little? Or is it no chance? Is that specified?
It's very specified. And since we lost our baby Sky, I have given birth to a little girl called Freya, who's now 28 months. And at my 12-week scan, I was told that it looked like she may have Down syndrome. And myself and my husband were like, that's fine, we'll proceed with the pregnancy. You know, there was markers there that she might have something wrong with her. And we were saying, well, once it's not fatal, we'll go ahead with the pregnancy. I was offered an amniocentesis and I said no because the risk of miscarriage, I wasn't prepared to do that. Freya was then born in July 2013 with a chromosome abnormality, a cleft palate, a hole in her heart, bilateral hip dysplasia. Her chromosome abnormality is called 4q deletion. She has been cared for by Crumlin Hospital, who are the most amazing people ever. She's doing brilliantly. She has a lot of issues. She has a CPAP at night. She is a child with special needs. She is a child that was born with an illness. She is a child that, you know, that Paul would refer to, or, you know, plenty of times Cora would refer to. The difference between Freya and Sky are worlds apart. Sky was given a 0% chance of survival because the tests were 100% accurate. And in Terminations for Medical Reasons, you know, we're there to support women and couples and families to proceed with their pregnancies and to give birth to their babies. But it should be the choice of the family. And Paul says that, you know, that there's actually no such thing as a fatal fetal abnormality. Paul, if you ask any obstetrician, and you have to remember, these babies, we wanted them to live. This baby was loved and so wanted. If anybody was going to fight for this baby, it wasn't Cora or Paul, it was me and my husband. And we would have gone to the ends of the earth to try and give that baby a chance.
Okay.
So to prevent the suffering of that baby, my 2 boys that I had at the time and myself, we chose what was best for us, except we were kicked out of this country to make that horrific decision.
Cora, you believe that people who find themselves in the situation of Arlette, that they should basically continue the pregnancy?
Well, I think, Mick, the first thing that I want to say, because I haven't met Arlette before, I have said it to her on Twitter, is that I am very sorry for your loss, Arlette, and the loss of her baby. And I know that that's a terrible tragedy for families to go through. I want to talk, though, just about one family that I know of, and that is the McBreen family. They were told when Mrs. McBreen was pregnant that their baby had a fatal fetal abnormality. They were told 100% there is no chance that your baby will survive. They were put under such pressure to consider their options, pressure from their doctors, that they eventually stopped going to their hospital because they just couldn't cope with the pressure. It was so traumatic. They were getting no support. They were told 100% your baby will not survive. She has a fatal fetal abnormality. There is no hope for your child. Grace McBreen recently celebrated her first birthday. She's learning to swim. You know, she is deeply loved by her family, and she's a member of, you know, she's a citizen in Ireland today, despite what the doctors said about her before she was born.
On the basis, and that's a heartwarming story, but on the basis that certainly it would appear to be statistically very much exception rather than rule. On that basis, should those people who have faced that horrendous situation not have the choice in terms of the best way to proceed as to whether or not, if they're told that they should have the choice to have a termination in their own country rather than having to travel?
You see, you're saying, Mick, that it's a statistic rather than the rule, but in fact we're not hearing enough from the families who have experienced the what the McGreens went through.
You're disputing the general perception that the vast majority of those cases, unfortunately, there is no life
well, what I'm saying is that I think it's unfortunate that there isn't a family who've been through that experience sitting on this panel this evening to give you their personal experience.
Absolutely, I've heard the stories before, and it is welcome.
What I would say, and is to go back to what you were talking about at the beginning, is that we need to talk about sensitivity in this whole area for everybody. And I know that that's what we all want. I mean, the Belfast ruling was a very chilling ruling for many people, and the judge in that talked about how the baby, there was no life to protect. That's what he described. And I think we can all agree that we don't want anyone to talk that way about an unborn baby. Let me just tell you what one Oireachtas member is on record as saying. This is how he described babies who he said had fatal fetal abnormalities. And this is what he said: simply a piece of flesh with no sensation, no capacity for sensation or any form of feeling.
Yeah, but there is extreme language. Hold on, excuse me. There's extreme language on all sides, and that is not typical of anybody on any side. That's extreme language on one side.
Well, that's an Oireachtas member.
Well, grand, but that's on one side. But the gist of it seems to be that all of the opinion polls that have been taken suggest that the majority of people want a scenario whereby abortion is available to people in the very unfortunate situation of fatal fetal abnormalities and perhaps in other scenarios. Are you saying that the people should not be given the option of voting for that by a repeal of the Constitution?
What I'm saying is, as I said before, many of these cases are misdiagnosed. What about the Grace McGreens? Are you saying
the people should not have a say in this by actually voting on what's in the Constitution?
No, but what I'm saying is we need to have a proper debate on this issue, which we're not having. For example, how many of the viewers tonight know that the Irish Medical Organisation at their AGM earlier this year called on the government to provide proper hospice care for families in that situation? And that means families who are told that their baby is unlikely to survive for very long, or maybe, only for a few minutes, or whatever length of time their baby will have, they are not given the proper hospice care in this country. But let me just finish.
But it's very simple. Should the people have a say in it or not by examining the 8th Amendment? Are the people entitled in today's world, 32, 33 years after it was put in, and let's face it, an awful lot of things have changed, should the people have a say? And if they so decide that it should remain the way it is, well then so be it, but at least the people today will have a choice. Are you against examining the amendment on that basis?
The pro-life campaign is not, and has never been against referenda. Hang on, let me finish. What we are against is a one-sided debate, which is what we're having at the moment, because like I say, I don't hear the politicians who are talking about this issue ever mentioning the fact that the Irish Medical Organisation has called for that specific support to be put in place. They completely ignore it. And the other thing is that we're not hearing from all of the families. For example, many families come back from England having had an abortion in those circumstances, and only then they discover that there is hospice care in this country. And that is a scandal. It's something that should not happen.
Can I just say something, just in reply to Cora, with this misdiagnosis? If there was a misdiagnosis where a doctor has told a couple, and it is a lovely story that that child is doing well, 100% your baby is going to die, and that baby is now 1 and learning to swim. That is a medical mispractice. Those doctors should be brought to court over that. We have rules and regulations for that. And you'd have to wonder, did that mother get a proper diagnosis, as in, was it just a scan? And a scan was said, oh, maybe you're, like, when you get a placenta, a CVS or an amnio, it's sent over to London. It is then scientifically, there's no going back, like, you can't say, the baby has half of a Patau syndrome or half of an Edwards. So if those people were told their baby was 100% going to die, in that case, that's a medical mispractice. Right. And having gone through it... It's no comfort if
they follow their doctor's advice and have an abortion. That's my point.
My obstetrician never once persuaded me or swayed me to travel to Liverpool to have a termination, ever. They said they would support me no matter what, either way.
The logic, Cora, of what you're saying is basically doctors are not to be believed. And
no, that's not what I'm saying, Michael. What I'm saying is that there is a human being alive in this country, a member of a loving family, looking forward to Christmas tonight,
and
who
Arlette
doctors
out that
had said,
a misdiagnosis.
Who doctors had said would not survive, and her parents should have an abortion. That's the reality.
Okay, Aodhan, the pro-life campaign, I think it's fair to say, don't really want the 8th Amendment revisited, but you're at the other extreme in that a lot of people in the Labour Party are so-called pro-choice, and they want far more than specific situations in which abortion should be permitted.
Well, I don't think the Constitution is the place for this argument, and what the court case in Belfast has maybe done is to put our own situation into focus. And effectively what we have in the Constitution is a provision which I believe was a massive mistake 30 or so years ago. The Labour Party at that point campaigned against it. And what we are saying is that if we were returned to government, that we will have a referendum not to amend the Age Amendment, but to repeal it.
How would you replace it with?
Well, I believe that fundamentally, I think Paul is right in one thing, that language is important in this debate. So let's talk about what we're actually effectively talking about here. Every situation where a termination may be deemed necessary or may be considered is a tragedy. Every single one. So if somebody, for example, has been, a situation of fatal fetal abnormality, or has been raped, or is a victim of incest, or whose life is in danger, or whose health is in danger, currently in this country, despite what happened with Savita Halappanavar, currently in this country, medical professionals say to me and say to others that every day in this country, doctors will look at a woman whose health is at risk because of their pregnancy and have to wait until the moment until their life is at risk, until they can make an intervention.
But you want to go much further than that, and you can understand why people would say that it's a Trojan horse with some people, that they want to go much further than that and have abortion available on request.
What we are saying is, the first thing we have to do is to repeal the Age Amendment. When that is done, what we have presented is legislation that would replace that, because I think this is a place for the Parliament to step up and the elected representatives of the people to formulate legislation that would deal with the situation. And our view is that in terms of life of the woman, the health of the woman, the mental health of the woman, which would also encompass areas such as rape and incest and fatal fetal abnormality, that in those limited circumstances, it is absolutely humane to put the woman first. Now, the difficulty with the Age Amendment is that the woman doesn't come first, and we want to have legislation that puts the woman first.
Right.
And given that, and I understand people watching this programme have many, questions.
And one of the reservations they would have, Aodhan, is that if that is brought in, then that there is a constituency that the opinion polls would suggest is roughly the same size as the pro-life movement, about 20% or so, who want a situation whereby the woman has complete choice and it's effectively a full pro-choice regime. And you can understand that people in the middle, some of them, will fear that if you go down the road as far as you're suggesting, that this is just a stepping stone towards a similar scenario that exists in the UK.
That debate is also always made about every change that's ever made in any piece of legislation.
But you would be in favour of that type of regime?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't necessarily. No, right. I wouldn't actually, because I come from a background which completely understands the pro-life argument. I used to have a very pro-life outlook on this issue myself, until I became more aware of the issue and began to talk to people who have gone through situations like Arlette has gone through. And then I find myself completely incapable of judging a woman for making a determination in her own life that the pregnancy that she now has to deal with is risking her health or her mental health or another situation that she's very distressed about. Let's talk about the situation that brought us to the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Bill, which Cora felt very, very strongly against and Paul left Fine Gael over. That was a situation which was centred around the case of a teenage suicidal rape victim. Now, Cora and Paul would still say
we've moved on from that.
It's not, because this is the essential argument. do we still fundamentally believe that somebody who's a teenage suicidal rape victim has a choice, or that in every single circumstance, always, that child should have to go through that pregnancy? That is still Cora's position and still Paul's position.
Just another issue. You mentioned language.
Yeah.
The phrase abortion on demand, that is a loaded term. That projects the image of a young woman confidently striding in and demanding something. Nobody suggests that we should have justice on demand, healthcare on demand. That's a loaded term, isn't it? And it tries to project a particular image of a regime of abortion that is available on request for people.
Yeah, fair point. I suppose what it's trying to state is that, you know, across certainly Western Europe, starting in Britain and going further afield over then to the United States, that's what has happened once so-called limited abortion was introduced. Now, I'm glad that Aodhan, you know, reminded us of 2013 and the then abortion bill or protection in life bill, and Aodhan will remember, you know, his own views, and we all have embarrassing moments in politics where, you know, a reporter may be unfairly nabbed him, shall we say, and Aodhan was...
He wasn't a reporter, he was a pro-life activist.
Well, Aodhan, you were reported, you know, as saying that you saw that...
That's neither here nor there. That's Aodhan's position. That's not a position of the majority of people.
There's nothing I said in that article that I would withdraw. And there's absolutely consistent.
I'm glad you've...
I think a lot of viewers will not be aware of what exactly happened. Well, explain it briefly, very briefly.
A pro-life activist came into my office, pretended that they had a friend who was in distress, pretended that that friend had been to England to have an abortion, wanted to know what the Labour Party were doing in terms of this area. I assumed, actually, because when people come to your office and say, my friend, you have to instinctively assume that this is the person you're dealing with. It was a pro-life activist who decided to record the entire conversation. And in my effort to try and console this person, this individual from the a pro-life campaigner, decided to go and give it to a Sunday newspaper. Nothing I said to that person I would withdraw. Right. I absolutely, because everything I said to that person's on the
ask Arlette one thing first of all. Arlette, one thing that strikes me, people who have been through the tragic situation you have and those you're in contact with, is it very discomforting to hear this issue being debated constantly and moving, it would seem, at a snail's pace towards change?
Yeah, you know, the likes of the three guys here on the panel, this is their job. This is not my job. I'm a mum. I have a regular job. To relive and rehash my personal tragedy constantly it's a horrible thing to have to go through. But I'm not going to stop, and neither are the couple of hundred families in TFMR. They're not going to stop either. So it's just I can imagine that it's for a lot of people out there who've been through it. It can't be easy to be listening. Sorry, Cora. Tomorrow somebody will be going through this. Next week somebody will be going through this. And whilst my own personal story is, you know, it's sad and it's horrible what happened to me, there are layers upon layers of even worse tragedy when it comes to
Cora. Nick, I mean, I want to say again that there are so many people around this country this evening who are, you know, looking after and loving children who they were told would not survive. And that's a very important thing. We need to be told that. I want to make one point about what Aodhan has just said. The important thing about that report in the Sunday Independent, I think, was the fact that Aodhan said at the time, I wouldn't say it on the radio if somebody asked me, is this legislation based on the X case going to lead to abortion on demand?
If somebody went in undercover to the pro-life, they'd hear stuff that, I mean, that's neither here nor there. The majority of people don't come from either of your positions.
No, but I have a political point to make here, which is very important, Mick, actually. The whole purpose of that time was where the Labour Party was consoling Fine Gael TDs that this was all they wanted, restrictive abortion. And then we find out that Aodhan is saying one thing on the radio, and then when he's in a closed meeting with somebody who he thinks wants abortion on demand, he says, I wouldn't say it on the radio, but I'm telling you, once we get this, it's a starting point, and we'll eventually get the rest over time.
Can I be clear on one thing to ask you? Can I be clear on one thing? Are you saying that you have no objection to the referendum or the amendment being revisited and being put to a vote by the people?
No, what I'm saying is that, and what I've consistently said...
But do you have an objection to that?
Yes, I have, and this is why. Because the Eighth Amendment
already over the course of the show.
No, I haven't. I've never changed my position, Aodhan. Please let me state my position. I haven't. The point about the referendum, which the Labour Party doesn't want to accept, is the fact that removing it means removing a human right from the Constitution.
But the majority of people, things have moved on in 30 years, Cora. The majority of people would seem to want it revisited to be replaced with something else.
No, but you know, that's not what the polls are showing. The polls are showing that the Labour Party is completely out of step with the people on the ground.
Party. The majority of people
wanted... But it is actually, because the Labour Party are the people who are pushing for this, and they have consistently
wanted under certain circumstances for it to be available. That has been consistently the case over the last 3 or 4 years.
But you see, once we look at certain circumstances, once you... And Aodhan is right, you know, I will give him the point that he is consistent when he's off the radio or off air. Once you establish the principle that a human life can be ended, that is a principle that you have crossed a Rubicon, essentially.
And your definition of a human life,
if you look at
not necessarily...
If you look at well, it's science, biological, everything that we presume to be human.
Human rights,
but it is actually human rights. Yes, it is. The Convention of the Rights of the Child, the preamble says that the child is a vulnerable human being who is entitled to legal protection both before and after birth. If you look at every other country in the world where abortion has been introduced for these so-called hard cases, and we will always have hard cases which we must address
Cora,
in a sensitive and kind way, abortion always, it widens out. That's why you get abuses throughout the world.
Do you want to get in there?
Well, the point is that, again, going back to the issue that every single one of these circumstances is a tragedy, and that there are situations where women's lives are put at risk. And there are situations where women's health is put at risk. And I honestly can't say for the people in my life, people that I love, that in every single circumstance I could absolutely say, I'm sorry that, you know, your situation, your health, your life, the sexual violence that you've gone through, the incest that you've gone through, or the fatal fetal abnormality that you're carrying, that has to be swept aside, and that you have to be forced to go through.
Do you believe that the next Dáil, irrespective of whom is returned, or the formation of the government, do you believe it'll revisit the amendment?
I absolutely believe that the only way, and this isn't to be, I don't believe, a politically charged statement, because the only reason why the X case was legislated for, because Labour had it in their manifesto.
So this is going to be a big plank of Labour's re-election campaign.
The only way that this referendum will happen is if Labour are in government.
Well, there's other things that Labour should probably be doing.
Yeah, well, I think Aodhan is honest. I mean, it is a central plank of the Labour Party policy. The bill, I think, was published, was it last week or the week before? It is basically a replica of what happened in Britain many years ago. So, Aodhan, it's introducing abortion on a very liberal...
Have you read it?
Paul, quickly.
Have you read it?
I read your press release.
So you didn't read the bill?
I didn't read the bill in its entirety.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I know what the Labour Party wants.
But
I know what you want.
You're saying you read the bill, but you didn't read the bill.
I read enough to suggest...
What time limits do you support,
Cora, you didn't want a referendum, but previously you did. You said you read the bill, but you didn't.
Please don't tell me what time limits does the Labour Party want.
Excuse me, we've time pressures.
Ask Aodhan what time limits the Labour Party supports. That's really important.
This debate is going to go on and on. I'm afraid we've time limits on it now. Arlette, Paul, Cora and Aodhan, thank you all very much, and some of you